talking more about Peter Gynther, just before we go on and hear a few stories, because you knew him, we just were reading in the book then that he was one of 9 actually, which is pretty amazing, isn't it? He had one older sister, Hannah, I think.
Yes.
And he was number 2.
It's true. He was the eldest of the boys.
Eldest of the boys. So Hannah was the eldest, and then
And there were 7 boys to follow.
So let's get on to your memories of him. So what do you remember? Tell us everything you can remember about his personality, about his stature, about
Well,
some stories.
I can remember a few things about him, but when I think about his presence at this place, I can remember him going to the desert with my father one day, and they both came home, and he was under the weather a bit. My father, who probably could drink better than him, was also probably pretty proud that he had shouted my grandfather, Peter Gynther,
Which was his father-in-law.
Yeah, that's right. To a stage. I don't think he had to shout him too much. There's too many actually to get him suffering under the
Influence.
That's true. And I can remember Nana Gynther not being pleased when he got home.
Was this here at the farm?
This was at the farm. This is
at Granny's, at your house there?
So I can still remember that pretty well. He didn't come out here very much, but I also he came out here for a couple of days one stage, and I was fortunate to come with him because they decided to grow some trees for the shade of the cattle over here, and it's on this very property just down there where I think you should be able to remember some of those pine trees, Kathy. Can you remember some of those trees?
Pine trees?
Yeah, pine trees. There's heaps of them. They're sort of...
I think you have pointed them out to us before, actually, when we walked down there.
Well, you would have. They were only cleaned up by the developer, but I didn't think that they did be able to do such a good job, but they did actually.
That's almost a bit sad that they cleaned them up, isn't it? They were planted he would say he planted them, did he?
Yes, he planted them, but he only planted some, but they seemed to go themselves. They spread out very quickly. We had tea trees, those tea trees over there. Tea trees where Chris is today, they were covered the place and there was no grass. And that's what happened. They didn't grow them in the pocket next door. It was in that place. But then I suppose in the 1950s we didn't own the pocket next door. We were still paying lease payments or adjustment payments to the government per year.
So you were still using it though, the pocket?
Yeah,
because you had the 99-year lease or something, did you? Or?
Well, I'm not quite sure how long, but we seemed to have an internal use. Then we were very fortunate to get it around about the 1960s. Well, I think we must have got it in sometime in the... I went to Nudgee. We didn't have it when I went to Nudgee. About 1960 or 61, I think we got
the
next
land.
door.
Right,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah. And that was because you said Granny probably wrote to someone at that time, so...
Yeah, Granny was alerting up to... She probably heard of somebody else privately paying something from the government and said, well, why not us?
Do it as well. So, and Peter Gynther, do you remember whether he was loving, was he musical, what his personality, was he a warm person, give you hugs, or what was he like that way?
Well, he was a very smart person, we found out. But
that runs in the family, doesn't it?
Mainly through because he used to play us draughts. So we did have this game of draughts, and he loved to get us there, and he loved to suck us into the sense that we could beat him. And suddenly he'd set us up that he'd give us way. Sometimes he'd give us, we'd jump one of them, or other times we'd jump 2. If we jumped 1, he took delight in jumping 4 in reverse. And if we took 2, he'd probably take 5 in 5. So he was he had a great reaction to any time. So I'm sure he was his sense of humour never quite showed in his face, but he must have been laughing inside.
So he probably a bit of competitive spirit there.
Definitely.
And nurtured your competitive spirit.
Could be right. We thought we'd have him in a corner, and so we'd end up, and then we try to say, well, we'd end up by saying, let's play the first, let's see who can lose the most and get rid of ours the quickest. But that wasn't near as interesting for him, and it wasn't really interesting for anybody really, but but we enjoyed that game because he was so good at it, really.
So he played draughts pretty regularly with you, did he?
Yeah, he would play draughts, and he looked to play us draughts, and it was good really for us because he showed us that you could use your brains to your advantage if you study the game properly. So that was pretty fascinating. Very thoughtful person. You got to remember that his nephew, well, Sid Gynther was the last one of the crews, was the youngest, and Sid was the father of Professor Reg Gynther, and another senior lecturer who was. I got to think of her name. I can't think of her name, but
did you know Sid?
She lectured me. Pardon?
Did you know Sid?
I met Sid on a number of occasions.
So he was a carpenter.
Yeah, he was a carpenter.
Okay, but he had children that were academics.
That's true. That's true. He had those 2 children at the University of Queensland.
Let's get back to Peter, though, Uncle Peter. Yeah, same name. So you're obviously named after him, as we think we've discussed that before. Actually, you were named after Peter. Was he interested in farming at all? Because obviously he met Nana, who'd grown up on the farm. Did you ever see him milking the cows or doing anything to do with farming?
I never saw him in the bales once.
No. Okay, so he obviously wasn't interested at all.
I never saw Nana in the bales.
Oh, really? Because she grew up in them. She grew up.
I tell you what, I did now that I think about it. She had a love for calves, but she must have shown something. Must have seen him. I can't remember seeing him up there very much at all, really. But maybe it's my memory.
And I guess they were getting older too at that point.
Yeah, she was more interested in chooks and things like that.
Was she?
Yeah, she loved chooks.
Because she would have milked cows when she was young, though, didn't she? She spent a lot of time milking the cows.
Well, I don't know.
Okay, so that's something we have to...
She never mentioned it. She wasn't... Yeah, she was a very real town girl. That was one of the fascinating things. But you've got to remember in those times that men seemed to dominate.
They did.
Women stayed at home, but she only had a small family, of course.
But she was reared on the farm, though, Nana.
Well, that's true.
So she had her whole childhood on the farm here. Well, mind you, we've got a lot to talk about with Nana, but still on Peter Gynther then. Any other memory specifically? So you can't remember much to do with the farm. We've discussed that he's been a teacher. We discussed that he's worked in the railway. We discussed he was a very intelligent man. And you had a little bit to do with him. He was quite hands-on with the children, with all you and your siblings. You think he seemed to be a hands-on?
Well, I think
grandfather.
We might say that Mike, he's your father, didn't talk too much about him, but I think Mike should have been influenced by him a lot because he lived in there. He lived at Milton there at 13 Bellevue Street from about. Well, Mike was born about 1942 at least. I suppose that could have been a contributing factor that why Mike went there, because it was wartime years, and we had I never thought about this too hard, but the Americans were in the Lawsons there.
Yes, you said that.
And they come over frequently, but it's still funny. But so he was obviously had this business approach. That's for him. He's obviously put it to good work with his. And on the other hand,
do you mean Peter Gynther had a business
Peter
approach?
Gynther, yeah, because to have all those, he ended up getting this farm. Remember, that was left to a number of people on the Buckley side.
So do you know how Peter Gynther came across having money, or was it just that, did he inherit it, or was he good with money himself, and did he work hard and he just built it up, and then because he's the reason we still had the farm, it came down our line, wasn't it, because he bought everybody else out?
Yeah, it is a bit difficult because he had a brother Fred who we got to know who was a pensioner and who lived from day to day. We're not sure, and he never married. But Peter was the opposite. I must admit, he didn't. Nana used to give us a few things, but I can't remember him sort of buying, giving us anything. But he might, but probably. So one seems to think that maybe Nana was. We were just looking at. She was about 20. What did we say? She
25
was?
or 28 was
20,
it?
Yeah, 20. When she got
married.
We did. Yeah, we didn't. Did we establish where her
I'm thinking we thought she was a little bit older, so maybe we thought she was about 28. We'll have to look back into that. I've forgotten now. So we'll look into that.
Yeah.
So you're not sure about how Peter though came because he had a lot of investment houses, didn't he? Didn't he have flats and a few other things?
He had about 3, I think, anyway.
So was that his doing or Nana's doing?
Well, he was the only one who was working. I don't think Nana ever worked.
But I wonder if she controlled
once she married, I'm talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just wonder who was the controller of someone must have got up and organised all that. So you wonder whether he did it, and even though she wasn't earning the money, I guess you don't know all that, do you? Because you would have been too young, but it's just interesting to know who had the business head. Was it him or Nana or both,
Yes, well, when I think about it, I was just 17 or
so you wouldn't
16
have been,
and a half.
You wouldn't have been interested in asking those questions at that age.
That's right. I was 16 and I wasn't quite 17 when he'd passed away.
Yeah.
And I spent years at boarding school. But no, it's hard to tell because I can't remember him ever coming to Nudgee to visit me, so he wasn't close to me. But even when Mike come, I think Nana might have come down a couple of times. I can't remember.
Did you go to their place when you were at Nudgee? Like, did you find a bus or some way of getting there and staying there for a night or something like that, being in Brisbane?
Yes, we did. We used to go there. I'm not quite sure. We had 1 weekend off a semester, a term. There were 3 terms. So
did you go to the farm or did you go to their place on that weekend?
I don't think we would have come to the farm, and I don't think they would have had time to come there, but we could have come once in a while for a weekend at home.
And do you remember when you went to their place, was he warm with you, or what was how was he to you, sort of
Well,
thing?
he was always friendly to us, there's no doubt about it. We were always pleased, but we didn't, I don't know, see, he was being a guard in the railway, he probably was a working weekend. He was a shift worker in some ways. So we didn't see too much of him, I don't think, during my boarding school years, which was from 1952. And of course I went to Nudgee when I was 13 and a half or something, and that was that. So
because really, looking at his history then, he married Nana, and then at some point in that time, as much as he didn't grow up on the farm and Nana did, between him and Nana, somehow they've bought the other families out to own the whole farm for it to come down our line. So he must have had enough interest in it rather than just living in Brisbane.
Well, that's why I suspect that he was a very forward-looking person, because I can remember when I was come down those few days planting trees, we had a talk, and he said that he made this statement that seemed outlandish, that one day Brisbane will be out here.
Really?
He told me that, and he was a very foreseeing person. I think Nana must have had some influence on him, because why would he start to buy this out here? But I think he was. I don't think Nana would have had that foresight.
No.
She never.
Maybe she loved it and he bought it on her behalf because she loved it here. Or?
Well, yeah, Nana was a person who embraced people. She, I was just thinking one of the Nana's features was that she loved your father Michael.
Well, I guess she read him, didn't she?
But I was going to pursue the name of Michael. So anybody whose first name was Michael, she loved automatically. So if there was a Mike, somebody on the radio, she would hone in and listen to him every day.
Isn't that interesting?
There's an ABC radio show with Mike. I forget their names now.
Yeah.
But anybody with names Michael,
This is Nana. And her daughter married a Michael.
Say that again.
Her daughter Granny married a Michael.
Yeah, that's right. But it wasn't. But because I don't think she wasn't a real fan of Mick. He was known as Mick. But Michael, she liked the name Michael, not necessarily Mickey. But your daughter did marry a Michael.
Oh no, that's quite. Did Peter Gynther have a good relationship with your dad?
Well, they didn't have a close relationship. I don't think, because they were in two different. They were in two different aspects of life. He was from a professional point of view. Peter Gynther was a gardener railway. I think one of the perspectives as we're talking today is to realise that I didn't know him too closely myself.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
because
he was in Brisbane and it wasn't easy to get anywhere those days, was it either?
No, it wasn't easy. That's right. He did have a car. He had a car, but when I knew him, he didn't have he got rid of the car. I think.
Do you remember Granny and Nana talking fondly of him, or saying any stories about him? Do you remember any stories from their perspective, or not really?
Nana,
Granny and Nana talking about Peter Gynther.
Yeah, my mother. Well, there were different times in terms of a parent-child relationship. There wasn't
that's true.
And Granny was a product of that, in things that today parents, mothers would kiss their children.
That's
no
true.
matter what. Whereas they were very compact, loving as well, but from the inside, I think Kathy was like that when bringing us up.
Was he musical at all?
Not that I know of.
No.
I don't think he was, but I couldn't tell. He could surprise me because we didn't go to any parties together.
Yeah, okay. Okay, Uncle Peter, I think we've probably spoken a fair bit about Peter, unless you can think of any other specific stories about Peter Gynther, because then we'll round it up about Peter Gynther. Is there anything else specific you can, from a story of you knowing him and having met him or having heard about it or anything?
Well, I have to say that I had I always felt good at meeting him, because I felt as though he was a very nice person, and that's a nice feeling that I have about him.
That's
in summary.
Lovely.
And,
that's lovely.
And in at times, because it was different times then, and I was always pleased to see him. And it was only when I thought back that I felt that why didn't I see more of him? Why didn't he come and visit me at Nudgee and things like that? But it was because of the times, and maybe they were such great savers, that maybe the bus fare was too hard or something
that's
like
true.
that.
Something we don't know,
There's
is
lots
it?
of
We don't know.
little things.
And we're using our paradigm today of knowing we can drive around easily, and people didn't always have cars back then either, actually.
No,
so
well, that's true. And there was a war on in Korean War in the 50s, wasn't there? 50s,
I don't know the
51,
exact date.
51 or
He wasn't in any of the wars, was he?
No, he wasn't in any of the wars. But,
So
he was a very good citizen. Paid his taxes. And,
Did he? You said he drank sometimes, but he didn't drink much.
He didn't drink much, and I'm sure when he did break up, I'm sure the only chance he would have had a chance is when my father took him out. I think he was strictly under Nana Gynther's thing. And
was he a smoker, or? Because a lot of people smoked back then, didn't they? It was a normal thing to do.
Yes.
You don't remember?
No, I don't remember. I think he might have I think he would have I would have had a feeling he did smoke. The only other thing I could say is that I did ask him about church, and he always told that story that he wasn't a Catholic because he went to church one day to see what it was like, and because he wore a hat in the church, he got thrown out.
Oh, really? So was he not a Catholic?
No, he wasn't a Catholic. He was I'm not sure what he was. Well, presumably, I'm not quite sure. We just established.
I guess he wasn't Irish, was he? So
No, he came from.
Yeah.
Where do we say?
we had
Prussia.
Denmark, or
Denmark, south. That's right. It was a part of Denmark. That's right.
so I wonder, because Nana would have been Catholic, having been from an Irish family,
Yeah, that's right.
and so that's an interesting situation. So maybe Nana was a practicing Catholic and he wasn't then.
Yes, that's right.
So-
Well,
Because
that's
Nana
right.
always
He-
went to
he-
church.
He didn't go to church, as far as I know.
But
That's
she
what
went routinely.
I think she would have, but I can't remember her going to much to church. But she must have, I think.
Okay.
She would have.
Okay, because I only remember her going, of course, later
Then
years
of course
with
she
Granny.
was 97 in. That was no. She was died. She went. How old was she? 94
She was
or
93, I
something.
think.
93. I think
Yeah.
she passed away.
Yeah.
That's right. But that was 1977. So.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, so
right. Yeah,
you
she was
think
in Mackay actually with
70
us.
Well, that's when said 20 years earlier, 1977, 1957, she'd have been 73. Oh, no, sorry, 1953, that's right, 73. So I probably only knew her, you see, in her older stages.
Yeah, that's true too.
And there's a lot of hills between
Yeah.
Bellevue Street and the church.
Yeah, that's true.
But,
yeah, right. Okay. Yeah, that's great.
So, I don't know. I can't remember whether Mike took her to church when he got his car in 1950.
Mum might know.
Like
Mum might even know some of that information just from Dad discussing it with her. But because they win a car, Nana? Didn't Nana and Peter Gynther win something?
There was a Nana. Nana won the casket, not a car.
Oh, won the casket. So
Won £1,500.
so how old would she have been then? Like when would that have been?
Well, sadly, I wasn't around. But
As in you were two.
it
You
was
weren't
in-
born.
I think it was in the late 1940s. I
Before
think, but
you-
it could have been 50s when I was at
Right.
Nudgee.
Oh, I see.
It probably was 1950s.
And what did they do when they won?
Well, that's what we don't know, but it could have been that they paid our fees at Nudgee. But then they could have been they bought about 2 or 3 houses.
Because they had the few houses, didn't they?
Yeah, and the houses probably weren't about £500 each.
And because Mum and Dad do talk about occasionally them giving your mum and dad, I don't know, maybe $10 or something, or some money, and it was a massive help when they do that occasionally. They might have given them something.
What's this for?
Your mum, she mentioned one time that sometimes Nana might slip in some money in a Christmas thing or something, which was a really big help to them in those days. So
That's right.
yeah.
Well, I'm sure that Nana would have given Mike. I'm sure she bought that first car for him, but we couldn't establish that. I'm certain it was actually because he got that. But then, from my point of view, it was very handy because Mike drove me to school.
Oh, because you both taught at the
We
same
both
school.
taught at
That's
the same
right.
school,
So
and we
wait,
both lived there.
that's right. So it actually ended up benefiting you both anyway. And
There's one other story I must tell. Mike went out to some dance or something. Went out to for a night. I think he might have been with Jimmy Olsen, and he came back under the weather. You heard that story?
I think you might have told us at the dairy, but keep telling us that he got a bit of a serve from Nana.
That's
after
right.
that.
It was at the. He came back to Milton under the weather, and yes, and I think he couldn't have got too much of a serve from Nana that night because he wasn't fit to get a serve anyway. But the thing that I always take of it is that can I remember what it was that she I used to quote it all the time that she said she never wanted him to be a part of the Rosalie something.